Episode of Before the Bald Man Speaks. I am your host, as always, Andrew the Clown Kid Lawrence. You can find me on Twitter at the Clown Kid. We are coming at you live directly after UFC 194 and Conor McGregor's record-setting title knockout of Jose Aldo. Good God Almighty, this has been a crazy night. Here to help me kind of process and to keep my shit in check a little bit is you can find him on Twitter at anytime at Best Fight Picks. It's my man Daniel LEvi. Daniel, you wanted to come on this card. You knew you wanted to be here on Before the Bald Man Speaks for 194, and once again it's delivered. Another classic.
Oh my God. I mean, what else is there to say? The great Jose Aldo. Not only did he lose his title, I mean, hold on. We're talking about a guy that's been undefeated for 10 years. He's the only UFC featherweight champion ever. And Conor McGregor just went out there and knocked him out in the first exchange.
I mean, this is, in my mind, at least, MMA memories are always so short term. In my mind, this is the quintessential like shock knockout. I don't remember having like a jaw dropping quick knockdown like this. Ever. I think it beats out, Holly Holm knocking out Ronda Rousey because you almost kind of saw it coming. This was crazy. This was first exchange, just wide eyes open, caught him rushing in. There was nothing to go off of. I didn't even get an idea of how the fight was going to play out, and it was over. God, that Conor McGregor, he's a special character and a special athlete.
Yeah, not only that, but you know what? Finally, I feel like people are going to give him the respect he deserves. I'm not going to
no, they won't.
I'm not going to sit here and brag about, how I've been saying that this guy is the best 145-pounder on the planet for over a year. I'm not going to talk about that. What I am going to say is that, look at what the guy just did. Okay, so people have, first it's he can't beat a UFC caliber guy, and he knocks out Marcus Brimage in, 90 seconds. A guy who at the time was 3-0 in the UFC, had wins over Jimmy Hedges and Maximo Blanco, goes out there, starches him, and Marcus Brimage has never been the same since. Then he goes up there against Max Holloway, and he 30-26s Max Holloway. One doesn't simply 30-26 Max Holloway. Then he goes up there against Diego Brandao and knocks him clean out in the first round. What was after that? Dustin Poirier? Okay. Who's ever knocked out Dustin Poirier?
Yeah.
Conor McGregor. What's after that? Dennis Siver. Just a little showcase fight, a little, fun for the fans, just to keep himself warm for that title fight. Goes out there, takes care of Dennis Siver. Then it's he's never fought a wrestler before, so they give him
Chat Money Mendes.
And he was preparing for a stand-up fight with Aldo, and they give him the wrestler on 2 weeks and with an 80% torn ACL. He gets taken down, he shows his heart, he knocks him out. And I'll tell you what, Chad was never the same after, because my boy Frankie just goes out there and cleans house in about under 3 minutes. And then after that,
and then after that, this massive KO right here. Everything you said spot on. Like I was saying, he's just a really, really special kind of fighter. Not just in the audience that he brings to the sport, which is massive and it's very mainstream. He's just special in the fact of the technical. In the technicality, and in kind of the innovation that he brings to the stand-up game, for where everyone else is at in the 145-pound division. Don't get me wrong. It helps that he's a huge 145er. It helps that he does this drastic, 20-some-odd pound weight cut and goes in there as the largest man, kind of at featherweight. But with the power in that left hand and the size advantage and reach advantage he has, and just his ability to gauge space, it's really hard to pick, against him at this weight class.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better myself. Obviously, now we got to see Frankie Edgar versus Conor McGregor. But I'm actually glad, before we talk about that matchup, sorry to, to build that up. But before we talk about that, I'm glad you brought up the weight cut, because, every single time we see Conor McGregor on the scale, I'm like, fuck, dude, this guy looks like death. And I'll tell you what, what's scary about it? Not just the fact that he's cutting that much weight, but what's scary from a fan's perspective is that when this guy goes up to 155 pounds and he's not cutting that kind of weight, if he's knocking out Jose Aldo in 13 seconds, what the fuck's he going to do to RDA?
Yeah, I look at the 155-pound division as almost a great stylistic matchups all over it for Conor McGregor. He came out of Cage Warriors as a two-division champion. I don't think it's so outside the realm of possibility, riding the high of tonight's victory, that he couldn't do the exact same thing here in the UFC. No, I would like to say, you mentioned like who else stops Dustin Poirier. But a guy who stopped a lot of people, in the featherweight division, another guy who's kind of dropped down from 55 pounds, another guy who has a lot of power in his hands, Frankie Edgar. I think that's a goddamn matchup for hell for Conor McGregor. And you really want to test him? You really want to test him against a Hall of Famer in the sport, in my mind. Frankie Edgar is the fight to make. Will Conor want to stick around 145? I know that's a hard cut for him. It might not be worth the payoff for him. It's kind of wait and see, I think, a little bit.
Well, I'll tell you this much. I mean, Conor is a man of the fans, and he made a commitment that if Frankie Edgar wins his fight against Chad Mendes and Conor goes out there and knocks out Jose, that they're going to meet for the title. So, I mean, he's a man of his word. And, I know on paper Frankie's a very challenging matchup for anyone, not just for Conor. I mean, when I talk about Frankie Edgar, this is my favorite fighter. You know what I'm saying? But I think that Conor McGregor is that next generation. And, the way he made Jose Aldo look tonight, Jose Aldo is a guy, like we mentioned earlier, he's been undefeated 10 years. I mean, he's the only UFC featherweight champion. He's the guy that submitted motherfucking Cobrinha in a Brazilian jiu-jitsu tournament. You know what I'm saying? I mean, he's just the best that's ever been, number one pound for pound. Oh, yeah, let's talk about that. Jose Aldo is ranked number one pound for pound right now. So where are you going to put Conor now?
Yeah, I mean, you know what? The pound for pound list is kind of dog shit.
I know.
But to me, it's always just been a prestige thing of like, how long have you kind of controlled that weight class? Sure, does he get on the list just by being a UFC champion? I think you make the list. And probably in the way that he's done it and the performances that he's had, I think you slide him in there somewhere in the top 5. To really secure yourself in the upper echelons of the pound-for-pound list, you need to, reign for a long time. And like I said, I think, he's a special dude that could do it. As much as, I mentioned Frankie as a challenge and as a great challenge for him, I could see him winning that Frankie fight. I could see it going both ways. God, it's really just hard to doubt a guy after he's going to put in performances like that against, all-time greats.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't have said it better myself, And, you speak of, obviously to be ranked, at the top, you do have to go on that title reign. But, who's to say that he's not going to go on that title reign? I mean, what he's done so far is unprecedented. Not just the impact he has on the UFC, but the performances he does inside the octagon. I mean, who knocks out Jose Aldo in 13 seconds? I know I asked you that already, but I mean, dude, I'm still processing this shit.
It's really hard. It was really hard for me to even kind of start this show up because after a moment like that, you're just kind of dumbstruck a little bit. And you could go through the motions of saying, okay, what's the next matchup for Conor? And, oh, yeah, Conor set himself up for a payday. And is the next fight going to be in Crow Park or is it going to be in Las Vegas? Does he move up to 155 pounds? Do you move to 145 pounds? But I think it's so important just to kind of a little bit revel in the moment of just like, holy shit, we just watched something spectacular and brand new kind of emerge onto the scene of MMA. Someone made the point earlier this week that what's really special about this UFC pay-per-view is that we can watch the sport change, in significant ways. And we really did, across the board in a lot of ways, in a lot of different fights. But in this main event, with Conor McGregor actually becoming this superstar, winning this fight in such a big moment. We really did. We watched the sport make a huge fundamental shift, and there's a lot of repercussions, and we'll probably spend the next 4 or 5 days until we actually realize what those repercussions are. We might not know how much the sport has changed, until years from now. In hindsight, we kind of see it as a monumental shift in the sport, only because I could definitely see this skyrocketing Conor into a next level of popularity, and this helping him in his negotiations with the UFC, so that we see a sport that's almost, gives more control to the star power of the fighters rather than the promotional power of the UFC that they seem to exert over the sport right now. Now that's a lot to be seen, but like I said, I really think you just almost got to take a minute here and just kind of give a tip of the cap to Conor McGregor, and just like what an absolute great moment, and what an absolute great moment for the sport. I think a lot about the casual fighters, or the casual fans rather, who got to watch this fight. And it's so fantastic that you get to see, super exciting finishes that are unexpected and champions getting dethroned. This isn't boxing. This isn't fucking some guy going out there for 12 rounds, floating around and retaining his 18 belts. This is real exciting shit that anything can happen. You know what I'm saying, Dan? So I think that it's important with this main event to just kind of go, God damn it, Conor McGregor, like, almost thank you. This is exactly what's great about MMA.
No doubt about it. And I mean, there's so many points that you cover that we can go over. The fact that the sport is changing, and what Conor McGregor is doing for the sport. Obviously we mentioned inside the octagon with his performances, but outside, I mean, what other UFC fighters do you see on Jimmy Kimmel the week of the fight? You know what I'm saying? So I think what he's doing for the sport, is taking it to that next level. Also with his skills. I mean, obviously, I mean, do I have to go back to knocking out Jose Aldo in 13 seconds again?
Yeah, I mean, we're really starting to see kind of, a talent discrepancy, or just the showcase that I mentioned earlier in the night that like body shots are taking over a lot in MMA, but I think I'm almost refining that point in my mind. I think what's taking over MMA is this, is a striking from an MMA standpoint. Boxing has 100 years of kind of refining the style of boxing, but when you go into MMA, a lot of the skill set of boxing's lost because the stance has changed, and the distance between the fighters change a lot. So MMA is still trying to fighters in general are still trying to figure out like what are the best methods of being accurate and effective in an MMA fight. This is kind of the story of the resurgency of striking in MMA in a lot of ways. Early MMA, it all kind of, relied on, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu? How well can you control where the fight is with your wrestling? That knowledge base is almost out there enough so that now it's really all about how good are your hands.
Yeah, I'm actually really glad you brought that up, Andrew, because, there is this new wave of fighters, guys like Max Holloway, Louis Smolka, James Vick, Conor McGregor. It looks like these long strikers that, they don't just have boxing, but they're also mixing up the kicks to the bodies. They have very good footwork, and they're very hard to take down. That looks like the next generation, Before it used to be just that boxer with good wrestling. Now it's, they're bringing in arsenals, they're bringing in striking techniques that were once frowned upon and, looked at like, oh, you can only do that shit in a movie. Now guys are doing that inside the octagon, and they're incorporating all styles into the fight. So, just the evolution of the sport is really incredible to see.
Yeah, I think it's fantastic that you can kind of bring in some of these, techniques from Taekwondo, from karate, because there is that base of wrestling boxes. You know what I mean? Once you kind of have that, and there's kind of an equal level of talent when it comes to the wrestling side of it, and it comes to the jiu-jitsu side of it, you're allowed to say, hey, I have extra tools in this kit. I'm not worried about going to my back, because I do have a Brazilian jiu-jitsu game, so let me throw these kicks, etc. Let's talk a little bit about this co-main event too, because almost equally as shocking. No, nothing was as equally as shocking as that KO, but an equally kind of upsetting the apple cart and kind of shaking up a division. Luke Rockhold is the new middleweight champion of the UFC.
Oh man, and I mean, boy, did he make a statement. But you know what? And I'm not discrediting his win at all. He's the champion fair and square. But man, Chris Weidman cost himself that belt with stupid move. And I know my boy Nate Miller tweeted at me, and he was like, "Yeah, that stupid move was signing the dotted line." And that's all. The real stupid move was throwing that fucking spinning heel kick. I mean, dude, you're not Vitor, you're not TRT Vitor, you're Chris Weidman. Fight like Chris Weidman. When he was fighting like Chris Weidman, he was having success. I know people are saying he looked slow, but I mean, Chris Weidman's, he's kind of a slow guy. It is what it is. But that doesn't mean that he couldn't have won the fight. When he was throwing those kicks to the body, when he was letting his hands go, and at the beginning, he was actually out grappling Luke a little bit. But when he threw that stupid ass spinning heel kick, it cost him the fight. 2 seconds later, he's in the full mount and he's getting beat up, and then he just couldn't recover. And that right there cost him the belt. So what I think they should do is, there's a chance for a rematch, but if there's no rematch, then I'm thinking Luke versus Yoel and Jacare versus Chris Weidman.
I think that's perfect. You flip the two fighters. Winners face winners, losers face losers. Because we really are talking about a 185-pound division that kind of has a final four, top four that's really elite. To go back to your point, though, I see this exactly like that. Poor Chris Weidman, kind of got caught up in the moment, going for a technique and lost it for himself. Extremely reminiscent of one Chael P. Sonnen, who went for some ungodly, spinning clothesline, punch against Anderson Silva in their rematch, got sat down on the cage, and then we saw a fatal knee to his gut, and then the follow-up shots kind of finished him off there. That wasn't too many middleweight title fights ago in the grand scheme of things. Maybe that was 2.5 years ago that we saw another person kind of fight outside of their comfort zone after having a little bit of success and it costing them the middleweight strap.
Yeah, I mean, no doubt about it. And I'm just very curious to see what happens moving forward because obviously Chris Weidman, he is a UFC championship caliber fighter. And, at points in this fight, it was very competitive. It's just when he made that error and then got full mounted. And I mean, credit to Luke Rockhold because you know what? Champions are able to capitalize on situations and openings like that. And he proved that tonight he is the UFC middleweight champion. But I do think that at some point, maybe not in the next fight, but at some point, I would like to see the rematch. But for now, let Chris go heal up and let Yoel step up to the plate. And let's see what Yoel and Luke Rockhold can do.
Yeah, we mentioned it earlier, and I agree. Just to kind of finish off talking about Chris and Luke, a fantastic performance by Luke, but I really saw Chris kind of having an answer in the fight going his way until he kind of made that one mistake. Hats off to Luke. He was absolutely right in the post-fight commentary. Chris shouldn't be trying stuff like that against a fighter of his caliber, and it cost him. And that kind of wrote the story of that. Yoel Romero winning a very controversial decision in the fight just before it against Jacare had a great moment in the first. Kind of a typical story for Yoel Romero. Great moment in the first round. And then kind of gassed out. And Jacare was able to recover and kind of take control by the end of the third there.
Yeah, I don't think it was the controversial decision. This is how I saw the fight go down. I saw the first round as a 10-8 for Yoel, and I'll tell you why. Not only did he drop him, but he was landing some serious ground and pound. And, I mean, credit to Jacare for sticking in there because, a lot of guys would have covered up and, let the ref come in and save them. But Jacare wasn't looking for the door at all. And not only that, but his chin held up. So, props to him. And then the second round came around, and that's one of those rounds that you could score either way. I kind of saw it for Yoel a little bit. Maybe I'm biased because I had 2 units on him at plus 155. Because I always bet on him because he's always the underdog and he always wins. But, aside from that, Andrew, I just think that, the second round, that's the determining round and also how you scored the first round. Because, well, if you didn't score the first round at 10-8, I will, walk across this computer screen and slap you. Not you, but if someone watching didn't score that first round at 10-8 for Yoel, I'm telling you, man. What are you watching, man? I mean, he beat the shit out of him, but then that second round he slowed down. Jacare was still in the fight, so it all comes down to how you score that second round. Then that third round, obviously, 10-9 Jacare.
This is how I scored the fight. I think I'm getting some echo back on your end. Yeah, I scored this fight as we need to have 5-round title contender fights in the UFC. When any two fighters in the top 5 speak or fight each other, it should be a 5-round fight. This fight would have given us a much clearer example of who's ready to fight in that main event, in that title spot, if it had been 5 rounds. I thought you clearly saw the turn. in that Jacare lasted, and I think that fighting should account for, or the judging, or how we watch MMA, that should count for something. Being able to outlast an opponent's rush, and he clearly did it. And Yoel Romero clearly gassed. In a fight to the death, that would have been a fight that probably Jacare won because, Yoel Romero died of exhaustion. You could also make the argument in the fight to the death, they probably wouldn't have stopped in the first round, and Yoel Romero would have bludgeoned the poor dude. But, that kind of remains to be seen. I still think there's a need for rounds, but, a 3-round fight's just not the perfect expression of us understanding who's a better mixed martial artist, Jacare Souza or Yoel Romero.
Here's my argument, Andrew. Have you seen Tim Kennedy versus Yoel Romero?
Of course, yeah.
Okay. Would you agree with me when I say that he was closer to death's doorstep at the end of the second round against Tim Kennedy than he was tonight in the third round versus Jacare, right? Would you agree with that?
Sure, yeah.
Okay. And then he comes back and he still knocks out Tim Kennedy. So, with that being said, I do understand your point. Yeah, he was gassing a fight to the death. The way it was looking, maybe he would have lost. But you know what? The way the other fight was looking versus Tim Kennedy, it looked like he wasn't even going to get up. And he gets up, and then he goes out there and knocks him out. So with Yoel Romero, he's one of these freakish athletes that you just don't know what to expect. He looks like sometimes like he lulls you into a false sense of security, and then he drops you with a spinning elbow. So you just don't know what to expect from this guy. But one thing I do know is that he's the new number 1 contender in the UFC middleweight division.
Yep, and that he's surging with the power of gay Jesus. That is another thing we know. God, this was fantastic night of fights. Just if you looked at the top 3 fights, this whole weekend and the excitement surrounding having 3 events. Really, the UFC did a fantastic job by laying a huge cherry on top of this Sunday. These last 3 fights not only were they big names and names that fight fans like you and I and all the people who would watch the show really are excited for, but they all kind of delivered, and they all kind of escalated on like the delivery of the last one. Romero Souza had some fantastic moments at the beginning and kind of dulled down at the end. The Rockhold Weidman fight was just pure excitement the whole way through. If you don't like that fight, you're just not, this mixed martial arts thing isn't for you. And then the last, the main event with Conor McGregor knocking out Jose Aldo is just one of those moments, one of these jaw-dropping, just legendary moments. It's almost like one of those Kennedy assassination things in that you can ask, like, where were you when you saw Jose Aldo get knocked the fuck out?
Dude, I'm sorry to interrupt you on your own show, Andrew, but you just you took the words right out of my mouth. I mean, you'll always remember the night when Conor McGregor knocked out Jose Aldo in 13 seconds.
It's just this is one of the things that I hope, and I'm so fortunate I'm so glad that the UFC had a casual audience watching tonight. This is a night where the sport put its best fucking foot forward in so many ways. If casual people watch those last 3 fights, you saw some good, high-level, great personalities, fantastic, thrilling, exciting finishes, and, maybe we got some fans tonight, Fox deals aren't how you convert mainstream fans. You convert mainstream fans when in the huge spots, actually these fighters deliver. And you know what? I think you were my guest on the post-fight show on 189 too.
Oh, yeah.
That was a card that delivered in a massive way. Conor McGregor brings the luck of the Irish to the UFC. Every single thing he touches is turned into fucking gold, man.
Yeah, and I mean, not only that, but if you bet on the sport and you're watching this right now, I mean, are you going to jump aboard the train now or what? I mean, it's time to understand that this guy is the truth. And I mean, like, look, I'm not saying it to act like to be cocky. I'm saying it like I want to see you guys make money. And making money means investing on guys like Conor McGregor. I mean, dude, so he opens as the favorite, right? And then he closes plus 110, plus 115. So that means the not so smart money was coming in late on Aldo.
A lot of experts came in on Aldo at the end there.
Dude, I mean, here's my theory on that. Like, I really feel like, and this is one thing that I've been guilty of in the past. You know, with Anderson Silva, I thought he was invincible. You know, no one's ever going to beat him. And when Chris Weidman came around, you know, I was like, oh, you know, he beat Mark Munoz. You know, big deal. Everyone beats Mark Munoz, right? And I was like, this guy's got nothing. You know, his stand-up's rudimentary. You know, what's he going to do? Grind him out for 5 rounds, right? And then he goes out there and he knocks him out. And so here's where I'm trying to go with that. What I'm trying to say is that a lot of people fail to see when that next generation is coming up and when that changing of the guard is going to happen. One example of that, and I know that you called it, so I'm actually very glad that I'm on your show talking about that right here, right now, on Before the Bald Man Speaks. Do you know a guy named Henan Barao who I heard he went on a 30-fight unbeaten streak and was a minus 800 favorite over a guy named TJ Dillashaw who was 1-1 in his last 2 fights?
God, I can't believe you pulled that one out. You know, the first advice I ever gave out on the internet for betting advice for anyone, I said, if you're an American watching this show tonight, you know, this is before I did picks or anything, I said, put $20 down on TJ Dillashaw on this 4th of July weekend and salute your fellow patriot, and you will walk away with a cool, you know, $100 bill in your pocket. And God damn it, if that didn't pay off, man. So yeah, salute to me in my times of shame because I took a bloodbath this time around. But you make a very solid point about, you know, and can we put this to rest? This idea that anyone in this sport's untouchable, that anyone's invincible, because this is just shattering that illusion yet again in this sport. And this is the shit that excites me. This is why I like being an MMA fan, because everyone's touchable. Styles make the matchup. There's some guy out there who can beat every person who won tonight, which is fantastic and awesome and great. There's no one here who's a Superman. There's no one here who's a god. There's just, you know, the struggle of you know, constantly evolving and getting better. And the next generation of fighters are always going to come up and beat the old generation. And that's good. That keeps this sport vibrant and alive and exciting, God damn it.
Absolutely. You know, how fast it evolves is something that's, you know, truly spectacular to watch because, for example, the middleweight title picture. So Anderson Silva, you know, 16 fights, undefeated. You know, he sets the UFC record, breaks the title defense record, and then he loses to Chris Weidman, and it's the changing of the guard. Chris Weidman goes on, he defends his belt 3 times, right, over everyone of that generation. You know, guys like Lyoto, guys like Vitor, guys like Anderson. But now he's losing to that next generation, which is Luke Rockhold. So what I'm trying to say here is that the sport evolves so quick. It's not like one of these things that we can sleep on. That's why, you know, when we talk about Jose Aldo being undefeated for 10 years, you know, in a way, it's almost, you know, promotional hyperbole because, you know, anyone can be defeated on any given night. And here's another thing. You know, Dana White actually said this a long time ago, and I agree with it. In this sport of MMA, you get old overnight. And I truly believe that. You know, one day you look like the baddest motherfucker, and then the very next day, you know, you're getting knocked out with shit that wouldn't have knocked you out, you know? Like, for example, Chad Mendes. Okay, you know.
Chad Mendes woke up old this morning. Isn't that such a crazy idea?
Like, when I go back and I think about that, you know, it's not, you know, obviously credit to my favorite fighter, Frankie Edgar. He's a bad motherfucker, but it's not just Frankie Edgar. It's an accumulation of the fact that, you know, he was in that 5-round war with Jose Aldo. He did get knocked out by Conor McGregor. And then, you know, he comes back so quickly and he fights a world-class, you know, top 2 guy, potentially future champion in Frankie Edgar. So, you know, the sport passes guys by real damn quick. And I mean, you know, not too long ago, people were calling Chad Mendes the Mike Tyson of the featherweight division. I'm pretty fucking sure you're not calling him that anymore, huh?
Yeah, right. You know, you make a fantastic point about, you know, the game changing so quickly and having to kind of like rise to the occasion. That's why when people say that someone's getting hyped up too much, or they're getting too much love, or they're falling into their own star power too much, or they're doing too much outside shit, I'm always like, God damn it, people, this game is a cruel, cruel bitch. As soon as you get any type of hype, run with it. Grab it by both the fucking hands and hang on for dear life and suck it dry for every dollar you can, because you will not be on the tip of anyone's tongue in a year, most likely. If you keep 2 years of being the best in the world in this game, God damn it, you can go down as a legend. You know what I mean? Chris Weidman's on top of this game for, what is it, like a year and a half, 2 years as champ or something. And, and it seems so quick. A guy like Benson Henderson, he held the belt for 5 times. Now we're talking about, is he going to go to Bellator because he might be the sixth best person who's 170 pounds. This game is just ruthless, and when you have your stardom, cash the fuck in. Take the time, to be champion. Take 6 months between your fights, because every time you're going to win one, it's tooth and nail. Every single person gunning for you and training and developing techniques to beat you specifically. Just the grind on your body. You don't have long for this game. Get every single dollar you can. So the whole critique that everyone likes to say, this person's got too much hype. If you got any hype, revel in the hype, people. Love your own hype.
But with that said, revel in your hype, but don't buy into your hype. You still have to stay focused. And I'm going to give you a really good example of that. So we talk about how the next generation fighters, they usually beat the old school fighters. But tonight, one example of where that didn't happen was Leo Santos versus Kevin Lee. Now, this was one of my biggest.
Wow, you went deep. I was like, Damian Maia against Gunnar Nelson. Exactly.
Oh, yeah. Leo Santos versus Kevin Lee. We're talking about a kid that's 23 versus a guy that's 35, a guy that's been in the game. Didn't Leo Santos have like one fight in Pride or Dream back in the day?
Yes.
He's been around the game a long time, and obviously Kevin Lee was a minus 650 favorite. Obviously, a lot of people, including myself, lost on him, but thank God Conor McGregor came through in the clutch. But anyways, So Kevin Lee, he's not supposed to get knocked out in the first round by Leo Santos. But back to what we were talking about, obviously there is the changing of the guard, but the current guard, they can't get fucking cocky. You can have the hype, but you need to understand that it's hype, and you need to understand that, you are a human, you can be knocked out, and you have to, he thought he was going to go in there and run through him. And Kevin's a really cool guy. I interviewed him on Half the Battle. He said he was going to be the first man in UFC history to finish Leo Santos, and then it turned out that Leo Santos was the first man in UFC history to finish Kevin Lee.
So, and that's the nature of this game, man. It's a cruel turnaround. The distance between making history and being a footnote in history as the guy being knocked out is very, very fucking slim. My point on grabbing the hype, I always think of this, like you kind of have to divide yourself as a fighter in that you're staying humble enough so that you're constantly on top of the game and you're constantly evolving your game so that you have something new and surprising to bring in the cage. But you're also constantly playing to the rubes. I tell you all the time, we need stupid people in this sport, so we need people doing Conor McGregor dumb antics to get the goddamn money in this thing. So you got to be a smart person like Conor McGregor, and you got to keep the hype alive. You got to be doing the shows and saying the outlandish shit, and you got to be selling yourself as an unbreakable, undefeatable person, even though secretly in the back of your mind you kind of know that it's all bullshit. You have to go through the kind of media rigmarole. You have to go through the motions of pretending, that you're this, unflaggable, undefeatable, monolithic being, rather than just like a regular human, or just a regular fighter like all these other fighters in the division, because it's going to get you paid. You might lose your next fight, and sure, that's going to make you look like the biggest idiot when you do lose your fight, but it's better to be the biggest idiot who got paid fucking millions of dollars because everyone watched his fight to get his ass kicked, rather than being the guy who said, oh man, I could lose this next fight, and then you lost that next fight. You know what I mean?
I absolutely know what you mean, Andrew. I mean, yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah.
And that's it.
It's basically the theory of getting paid. That's all I'm laying out here. I just want goddamn money in this sport. I love this sport so much. I'm like, people, especially a lot of other hardcores, are like, these dumb mainstream people. I'm like, good. Pack up that Buffalo Wild Wings, people. Let's get some more goddamn eyeballs and put some goddamn money in these fighters' pockets. Yeah. We see so much great level fighting in the last 2-3 years because we're attracting great athletes because the money's finally getting good. What do you think a dude like Yoel Romero, like the superhero physique, the freak athlete of the Cuban genetics lab? Why do you think we get to see him in MMA? Because there's finally a payoff for him. He can finally make a couple $1 million in some big name fights. So it's worth it for an athlete of his caliber to pursue this game. You know, I want more athletes like that because they see $1 million paychecks. They see Conor getting paid tens of millions of dollars. You know, our big champions should be getting tons of money. And for that, I'm willing to tolerate, you know, a bunch of people who aren't as passionate as a sport about me and who come along for the ride for the big shows. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. I'm so glad you brought that up. And, you know, what's going to happen is that, well, first of all, people need to remember that Zuffa has only owned the UFC for what I think it's, you know, it's got to be somewhere between 13 to 15 years, you know, no more than 15 years. And, you know, the NFL and the MLB, you know, correct me if I'm wrong, but haven't they been around for, you know, 50 to 100 years, you know, very long.
Yeah, 100 years plus. Yeah.
Exactly. So not only that, but there's okay, so there's games for NFL on Thursday, Sunday, and Monday, and there's like what 30 teams. I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but what I'm trying to say is that there's so many more games at a time that there's more money in that. But now that, you know, the sport is growing, just think about this. It's only been around 13 to 15 years with Zuffa. Think about how it's going to be in 30 years from now. You know, now guys are suddenly becoming millionaires. You know, Conor McGregor. We've never seen a guy like him in our sport. But think about the guys that are going to come up in the next 10 years. You know, for example, now don't laugh when I say this.
I will.
Okay, let me mention Sage Northcutt for 1 second. I know I'm not allowed to talk to him. But let me mention it for 1 second. All right. So let me tell you something. So Yoel Romero, 38 years old, right?
Yeah, okay.
Sage Northcutt, 19 years old. Now, can we both agree that Sage Northcutt is a freak athlete? Yes.
Yeah, freak athlete. Yeah.
Yes. 19 years old. Imagine how he's going to be when he's 38 years old, when he's Yoel's age.
He'll probably be put in the coffin by some kid who's like half cyborg by the time he's 38 years old. Oh, yeah. You know what I mean?
Exactly. And that goes
with some telekinesis shit, and it's going to be over. Once the telekinesis hits the mixed martial arts game, it's over. You know that guy who used to do who does wushu shit on in YouTube and moves people with the force of his mind? Once that becomes an actual reality and someone can do that, all these people are irrelevant. Sage Northcutt is nobody.
Have you ever seen a dude bend a fork with his mind?
Yeah, once you can figure out how to bend a dude's back with your mind, game over.
Yeah, and I mean, in a way, Damian Maia, I gotta tell you what, man, you know, because Gunny Nelson.
Damian Maia breaks your back with his mind in a lot of ways.
Gunny Nelson
uses his arms, but
dude, I'm very impressed with Damian Maia. First of all, does he not kind of look like Johnny Depp's cracked out Brazilian uncle?
That's good. Yeah.
Look, what I'm trying to say here is that he's phenomenal because people don't know how good Gunny Nelson is, and Gunny was actually being competitive at the beginning of those rounds. But once he'd concede that, letting Damian get on top, that's when it was over for him. And Damian is just, once he gets on top of you, man, you're not getting this dude off of you. I got to give him props because, every time I fade him, he always comes through and wins. So
Damian Maia, world-class jiu-jitsu. Gunnar Nelson, very good jiu-jitsu. You're talking about the difference between someone who's, an incredible Brazilian jiu-jitsu artist versus someone who's, an all-time great at Brazilian jiu-jitsu. Damian Maia at 170 pounds, it's almost just a matter of time, I think, until he has to get a title shot. He took one step back. I forget who he lost to off the top of my head right now, but he's a big name, or not a huge name, but he is a name, especially amongst hardcores. And that grapple-based attack is nothing to fuck with. You got to put him in contender bouts. You got to feed him names. No more Neil Magny's. No more, no more Gunnar Nelsons. To be honest, you got to put him against ranked people in here. Time and time again, he's proved himself to be up to any kind of challenge at that weight class. I still remember him fucking squeezing Rick Story's poor face until it just squirted blood out of his nostrils. And, a highlight reel like that, kind of sells some things to some mainstream audiences. Brazilian dude who speaks English, I could see that as the co-main event, underneath, a big Brazilian card. A lot of things you can do with a guy like Damian Maia. I think, he needs a little bit of promotional push.
These are my two options for him. First of all, he called out the winner of Robbie Lawler versus Carlos Condit. So, you know what? If they make that fight happen, I'm not opposed to it. You know, Robbie Lawler versus Damian Maia, Carlos versus Damian Maia in a 5-round fight. It's interesting, not just because of the stylistic clash, but because of the fact that when you've seen Damian Maia go those later rounds, he's notorious for gassing. You know, one example is that fight with Ryan LaFleur. In that last round, the 5th round, LaFleur won at 10-8 because Maia was so fucking gassed that the ref had a dock a point because the dude kept flopping to his back. So, you know, you can't be doing that shit in championship fights. And that was against fucking Ryan LaFleur. Now, you think he's going to be doing that shit against Robbie Lawler, who has one of the best sprawls in MMA? I mean, did you see that fight? I'm pretty damn sure you saw that fight because I was on your show after it. You know, a guy named Robbie Lawler fought a guy named Rory McDonald. And
Oh, God. You know, what a treat we've had as MMA fans this year. You know, I feel like I'm fanboying out really hard tonight, but we've just had fantastic fights this year in a quick span. You were my guest on 189, and that card was unbelievable. And that fight was unbelievable. Sorry for interrupting you, but yeah, you know, his Robbie Lawler's sprawl game's on point. I think that matchup's tough, you know, to call both ways. If Maia gets control, he can definitely hurt and dominate Robbie on the ground, but could he do it? You know, I don't know.
dude, did you hear that Johnny Hendricks is fighting Wonderboy?
Oh, that's a great fight. I think that's fantastic.
Oh my God. Like, okay, this is my opinion on that fight. So,
Does Johnny make weight?
well, obviously there's all that shit. He better fucking make weight. But let's say he doesn't and they let him fight anyways. First of all,
Okay.
people don't know and they don't understand how good of a striker Wonderboy is. Let me tell you how good of a striker is. I got that inside knowledge, and word on the street is that when Wonderboy went to go train with Anderson Silva and Lyoto Machida back in their prime, I'm not talking about, you know, Marcos from Thailand, Anderson. I'm talking about fucking Anderson in his prime and Lyoto in his prime, and they brought out Wonderboy to spar with them. And I mean, I'm not gonna tell you exactly what went down, but I'll tell you that he fucked them both up badly, and that's the
I'm not going to tell you how it went down, but this is how it went down.
like, dude, he's one of the he might be the best striker in the UFC, and I'm not kidding. I'm not exaggerating. You know how I feel about Conor McGregor. Wonderboy might even be that next level. If you go watch his karate fights, holy shit. But here's the thing. He's been criticized for his wrestling. Then he goes out there against Jake Ellenberger, who, you know, we know Jake is a shell of his former self, but we can all agree Jake Ellenberger's got way better wrestling credentials than Wonderboy. And who out-wrestles who? Wonderboy out-wrestled him and then knocked him out. So here's the thing. If this fight stays standing, Wonderboy will knock out Hendricks, but Hendricks isn't going to try to stand with him. He's going to do what he did against Matt Brown, you know? When he went in there against Matt Brown, as soon as Matt Brown threw one of those elbows that he's known for, Hendricks was like, fuck this shit. I'm just going to stall this one out. You know, he did his best praying mantis on top of Matt Brown and stall that one out. You know, he didn't want nothing to do with Matt Brown.
Yeah, no, that's a fantastic matchup, I think. I think that there's some really good things that are happening at 170, you know, to pile on to the great things happening at 185 and to pile on, you know, to the big things happening in featherweight. It's really interesting to see, you know, the UFC have a lot of intrigue in, you know, traditionally, you know, settled divisions. I mean, you know, if you look at the top of it, you know, 145 pounds, you know, that's been a division that hasn't had any big fights in it forever. It hasn't had a title change ever. You know, it hasn't made money for this company ever, and that's, you know, been thrown on its head. We lost the biggest draw in the UFC at 170 pounds. So we're finally at a point now where after, you know, we've had a couple title exchanges, but you know, we're seeing a lot of intrigue in that division boil over. Middleweight's as exciting as it's ever been, you know, kind of coming off the heels of, you know, that division finally paying off for the UFC monetarily with Anderson Silva and, you know, Chael Sonnen. We've had, you know, success after success after success there. So if you're looking at the UFC, despite kind of a lot of people earlier this week getting exposed and Ronda Rousey getting knocked out, I think you can only look at the future as with so much excitement. There's just so many money fights to make, and there's so much intrigue being built. And a night like this just kind of, you know, it's kind of the moment where the pot boils over. You know what I mean? Just fantastic. A lot of things building, a lot of stars being built. To open this card, we had Max Holloway, win a unanimous decision against Jeremy Stevens, in what I thought was a really fantastic fight. So we have another star, kind of to feed into that, into that upper elite crest of 145 pounds with Max Holloway.
Absolutely. I'm glad you brought him up because this kid I am so impressed with. And, obviously Jeremy Stevens hit so hard that when you heard that Max Holloway post-fight speech, you could tell, he was like, I'm sorry about my performance. And I'm like, dude, that was a great performance. And I'll tell you why. It might have not been the kind of fight that you show a new UFC fan, but for the people that have been watching for a long time, they understand what they saw because Max Holloway, he out-MMA'd Jeremy Stevens. And that's something that was really interesting to see because obviously he outstruck him on the feet. And then, Jeremy Stevens tried to make it into a wrestling match. But what I really liked was that Max Holloway was the one taking Jeremy Stevens down, so he showed that he doesn't just have that, the takedown defense. He's got the offensive wrestling too now. Obviously I don't think he's going to go out there and try to take down a guy like Chad Mendes. I think he'll try to knock him out. But what I do think is that he'll be able to keep the fight standing, or if he gets taken down, he'll be able to get right back up. So
I like that he was able to kind of, he just seemed to have the advantage in rings craftsmanship. He just had the ability to be elusive and to institute what range the fight was going to happen at. And you're absolutely right, man. Hawaiian's not known to wrestle. We've got a long history of Hawaiian dudes who don't want to hit takedowns. But Max Holloway, kind of skirts the mold there a little bit. He's definitely a scrappy dude. His game's probably the most evolved. He's probably the best fighter to come out of the islands. Just a really exciting guy. I'd love to see him, against the Chad Mendes. Love to see him against, even an Aldo in Hawaii, which was what he shouted out. I love that idea as well. I want to see big things happen for the kid, and I want to see him be put into money spots. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no doubt about it. Obviously, it's either a title shot or a #1 contender fight for him next. I mean, he's on an 8-fight win streak. But just back to the Hawaiians, obviously you mentioned that they might not be known for the best takedown defense, but actually, a guy like BJ Penn back in his prime, do you remember that time when Matt Hughes picked his leg up all the way here? But here's actually where I want to go with this because we were talking about how the sport is evolving so much, but now you see a guy like Louis Smolka, and he actually made his UFC debut in my hometown, ATL. So I was there. He went against the guy, Alp Osklich, who's a D1 wrestler. And in the third round, Louis Smolka is the guy who's full mounting and back mounting the D1 wrestler. So it goes to show that nowadays it's not just about being a good wrestler. It's about being an MMA fighter. And that's it goes back to what we were talking about earlier. The guys that were just, they had, a left hook and a takedown. Now if that's all you have now, you're fucked, man. You know what I'm saying? So
everyone's got a left hook and a takedown. Just the talents that are the bare basics to like get you in is just a lot better nowadays. It's also important to note that our understanding of what works wrestling-wise in MMA has changed and evolved a lot too. Kind of with the recent things this sport, but it goes all the way back to even a guy like GSP who didn't have wrestling credentials, not a double NCAA wrestler. These guys who have this experience in amateur wrestling and are quite successful in that doesn't necessarily always translate into MMA wrestling. There's very few skill sets from that sport that actually apply, once you talk about the range of the cage and the ability to throw strikes and kicks and, all the different stances and looks that people give you that they won't give you on a wrestling mat. And, kind of the motivations, because the end of a wrestling match happens when you pin your opponent. Unfortunately, in MMA, pinning your opponent does nothing. And in fact, there's hundreds of people in your division who would like you to try to pin them so that they could work from their back. So, we used to look and idolize this NCAA wrestler. Oh my God, he's a dominant MMA wrestler, or he'll come in here and just dominate people with takedowns. That's just not the case anymore. A lot of times you see guys who don't have backgrounds beating guys who do have backgrounds. Sometimes it's because they're rocked and very hurt, and that always helps. But this isn't as straightforward, as a thing as maybe we once thought back in the day. the game is definitely shifted. I think you look at a dude like Conor McGregor, no wrestling experience, but you can see that he has good solid hips and he moves his hips well, so he's always going to be very defensive. In the wrestling department. I mentioned it before. GSP, a guy who has zero wrestling background and was probably the best MMA wrestler in the history of the sport. So our ideas as fans and our understanding as fans are evolving as well as the action in the cage kind of evolves.
Absolutely. And let me give you a really good example of kind of the overall thing that we're talking about here. If you go back and you watch a fight like Johnny Hendricks versus Carlos Condit, at the time, Johnny Hendricks was just known for, blasting that one big left hand and sending you across the deck and his wrestling. He wasn't known for the combination punches and, the leg kicks that he started to add later when he fought a guy like Robbie Lawler, because the Carlos Condit fight taught him he had to evolve. Now, let me tell you where I'm going with this. Where I'm going with this is that Carlos Condit, obviously he's got no wrestling background. He's going in there against a guy like Johnny Hendricks, who, he's a D1 champion. He's got all the credentials. And, obviously Hendricks would get the takedown. But like you said, in wrestling, it's just to get a pin. Okay, oh, great, you're going to pin me, big fucking deal. Carlos Condit gets back up every single time, and then he starts teeing off on the feet. And a lot of people, myself included, believe that if Johnny Hendricks versus Carlos Condit was a 5-round fight, Carlos Condit would have finished him, because you saw how he was coming on in that third round. And that goes to show what you were talking about, that there's these guys nowadays, and I know Carlos Condit is an old school OG vet at this point, but at one point, he was that new breed. But one thing that you got to give him credit for is that he is constantly evolving. So when you take Carlos Condit down, you're actually going to wear yourself out, because he's going to get right back up.
Yeah, it's a constant theme, and we just keep bringing it up in this thing, just like how quickly this game changes, and basically your ability to keep your star power as is equal to your ability to change once you hit this elite level. You got to be in. A good tagline for this UFC event could be UFC 94. Shit done changed. Because
sorry to interrupt you again, but not just UFC 194, but UFC 193. I mean, and the subsequent nights, before this, the preceding nights. I mean, Paige Van Zandt, the way she got beat up, and yeah. So
this year of MMA has been a year of just shit done changed. But maybe that was like that this year. Maybe that's just the constant of this sport,
Dude, absolutely. And once again, it goes back to what we were talking about. The sport is evolving, because, back at 162, when Weidman knocked out Anderson Silva, at that point, shit was changing. But the thing we got to understand is that shit is always changing. It's not just, it's not, it could be you wake up overnight. Like we said, fighters get old overnight. And, we were saying Ronda Rousey, I was saying, at least, a lot of people were probably saying the same thing, that Ronda Rousey, she's going to retire undefeated. None of these women can handle her at all. And it's funny, Ronda in interviews, she's saying shit like, I can beat any of these girls with one hand. And at the time, it's like, yeah, she's a bad motherfucker, of course she can. But then she goes out there and passing of the guard, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, to summarize, and we'll break down the prelims, quickly, because we've kind of, talked about this, and I think it was good and it was important, just because, the main card was so kind of crazy and important. But, this is it. This is the excitement of MMA, is that, is the unpredictability of the thing. There's kind of always a philosophical debate of, the dichotomy between things being fixed in time and not changing, and the world being in constant flux. As far as the philosophical kind of ethic of mixed martial arts seems to be that shit's always in flux, and the sport's kind of better for it. Let's just go lightning speed through these. Let's play that game. We'll do the prelims just on lightning. I'll tell you the result. You tell me the number one thing that stuck with you from the entire fight, whether it was one person's performance, whether it was a lousy referee's decision, whether it was a huge left hook. You tell me the one thing in the fight that determines the outcome of it in your mind, and we'll go from Uriah Faber back down. Uriah Faber wins a unanimous decision over Frankie Saenz. Kind of controversial. What do you think, man?
Well, here's the thing. I went on Cage Cash and I picked Frankie Saenz, and Nate Miller was like, "What the fuck are you doing, man? And, it's hilarious. But here's the thing, man. 2 years ago, I said Faber was on the decline. So, once again, back to what we were talking about. One day
changes. You wake up old.
Changes, and you start losing the guys that you shouldn't lose to. You start getting knocked out by guys that wouldn't normally knock you out. Gray Maynard, perfect example. One day he's the undefeated motherfucking #1 contender going to these wars with Frankie Edgar. The next day he's getting
Yakovlev's knocking you the fuck out.
Yeah, exactly. So the sport changes overnight, and even though Faber won that fight, what you got to take away from this fight is that now people are saying, I can't wait to see Frankie sign his next fight.
Yeah, I think that it's been very telling since the Francisco Rivera fight for, the people who remember that one, that I got poked in the eye, that Uriah Faber, there's some chinks in the armor there. Still a very elite fighter, finds a way to win, but, the guy who's got some miles on the tires, definitely getting old. I'm not sure if I favor him over either Cruz or TJ, but we really got to see.
Yeah, hold on. Andrew. First of all, I apologize again for interrupting you on your own.
Go for it.
But dude, listen. If TJ and Uriah fight,
it's a bloodbath, right?
I just pray that the odds makers aren't listening to this, and that for some reason they're not smart enough to set that line at the -2,000. It should be for TJ Dillashaw, because if it's -500 Dillashaw, I'm telling you right now, that's a 10-unit play.
Yeah, man, that's some investor 401k in that. You know what I mean?
Dude.
Have some retirement money on that.
Now, speaking on this topic, let me tell you who the two motherfuckers are in that division. All right?
Okay, real quick.
Aljamain Sterling and Tomas Almeida.
Yeah, that's the theme of the night. The next generation moving in. This is the next generation that's gonna contend against TJ Dillashaw. The person who's gonna beat TJ Dillashaw isn't the stars from the past. It's gonna be the guys in the future, like Almeida. Like Aljo.
Aljo.
Okay. Oh God. Tisha Torres beat Jocelyn Jones Lindbarger, who showed up a little bit, and then honestly it was quite a dull fight. She showed up a little bit at the end. Tisha Torres swarmed her though, and kind of had her showcase moment. What do you think about the fight?
Next.
Wally Alvarez beat Colby Covington with a really quick submission in the first round. Kind of surprising to people. It was a pick'em fight. When Bruce Buffer was reading off the cards. What did you think about Wally here?
Well, I did pick Wally Alvarez, but I didn't bet him, so I can't brag too much. But I will say this: that dude is a scary son of a bitch, and I know he gets criticized a lot for his fight with Juban, which I scored it for Juban. But one thing I got to say here is that Wally Alves has been fighting way tougher competition in the UFC than one Colby Covington. Not only that, but Colby Covington's one-dimensional. And like you were talking about earlier, you can't be one-dimensional in this game, and he got exposed. So it is what it is. Wally Alves is going to be a guy if he can keep it up.
Yeah, no more guys who just can wrestle as a wrestle test for Wally Alvarez. It's been abundantly clear that he will choke you the fuck out. Yeah, Kevin Lee. We mentioned it earlier. Kevin Lee with getting knocked the fuck out by kind of an older fellow in this sport, Leandro Silva. Poor guy, 155 pounds is a very stacked division, and it looked like this was supposed to be a showcase fight for Kevin Lee. And yeah, Leandro Santos. Sorry, not Leandro Silva. Listen, you fucking Brazilians, and you sound the same fucking names. Fuck each and every one of you. I don't know what kind of national conspiracy you got going down. So you could imagine working as a police officer in Brazil. Okay, give me your name and your address. And the guy's just like, yeah, I'm like Anderson, Silva. This is my cousin, Jacques. Everyone's the same fucking name.
Yeah.
There's 6 last names for a country of 8 billion people. I don't fucking get it.
But hey, at least all the women have nice asses.
There's some very big positives about Brazil. There's no joke. It's a very. I'm liking a lot of what they're doing. I'm just saying they fucked up the name part. They got a lot of other shit right.
One thing we can agree on is that they're very consistent.
Yeah, their consistency is there. Oh God. Okay, so I'm sorry, Leandro Santos, another extremely popular name.
Leonardo Santos.
Oh, this is easy. Leonardo Santos.
Yeah.
That actually is pretty unique for Brazilian standards. So shame on me. Maybe I'm a bad MMA fan. But he had a huge KO victory, whatever his name ended up being. So kudos to Brazil. They needed some shining light in this fight, or in this fight card, because they pretty much got battered. If you were a Brazilian fan who paid those dollars to go to Las Vegas, my heart goes out to you. Like I was saying, Kevin Lee had a great chance here. I think this was, that the UFC really liked him and liked his personality and liked, the skill set and his look. And this was supposed to be, one of his rub fights. He was supposed to kind of start building his name. He got kind of an older fighter that, he was supposed to dominate. He was a minus 600 favorite. Now, it's the UFC, so sure, you can say, oh, in 2 or 3 wins, he's right back in it. But it's really hard to find the time and the space to get a promotional push at 155 pounds. There's just too many guys and too many names. So poor guy kind of, missed out on a huge opportunity. What did you think about the fight?
Dude, I feel for Kevin Lee because obviously I think he's a really nice guy. He's been on my show, so I've talked to him a bit, and he's a really nice guy. And I think he worked really hard for this fight. I think what happened was he started overlooking him mentally. All the preparation was there. This guy worked his ass off, and obviously when Leo Santos took his back, Kevin Lee shook him off. But I think he was a little overconfident on the feet, and on fight week he was saying shit like, I want to rematch Ally Kent at UFC 200, and it's like, dude, slow down. Leo Santos is a Novo and guy. He's undefeated in the UFC. Obviously we all know he lost to Norman Park, but hey, on paper he's undefeated in the UFC. On paper, Matt Hamill is the only man to defeat the great John Jones. But what I'm trying to say here is that, he should have won the fight, but like we said, man, you got to be on your A game, even if you are the new school kid. You can't just believe the hype. And
yeah, I think, yeah.
And you can't just be there physically. You got to be there mentally too. That's a big thing because Kevin was there physically. You saw him on the scale. He was shredded out of his mind. It's just that something up here, I think he already thought he won the fight when he was walking out there. Another good example of that is when Melvin Gillard fought Joe Lozon.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Let me say, because I was there. It was in Houston. Obviously Frankie Edgar finished out the trilogy with Gray Maynard. But the first fight of that pay-per-view was Joe Lozon versus Melvin Gillard. Now, that entire fight week, Melvin Gillard's at the Fan Expo, with sunglasses on indoors, signing autographs, fucking, being funny and shit.
No one loved the lights like Melvin did. Melvin loved the stardom.
And at the time, he was on a 5-fight win streak. So we were saying, if he beats Joe Lozon here,
Melvin,
he's going to go get that title shot against Frankie Edgar. So he's walking out. And if you have Fight Pass, go watch Joe Lozon versus Melvin Gillard. He's walking out, and he's like, he's celebrating like he already won the fight. Like he's high-fiving everyone. Like he's fucking, like he's feeling himself and shit. And then he just goes out there, he gets dropped, and he gets tapped out in 30 seconds. So you can't just be there physically. You got to be there mentally too.
I always kind of hesitate, and I'm not even sure if that's kind of what happened in this fight with Kevin Lee. I think, this fight is dangerous, and it's a cruel bitch, too, sometimes. Sometimes you just get caught. Your mental game can be there. The physical game can be there. But with these 4-ounce gloves, it's every single exchange. Well, you got to be turned on for every – you can't make a mistake in any exchange because, all these guys are talented, and all of them can throw, basic punches, straight punches, very well, and they probably have some power. So if it hits your chin on that wrong angle, that nerve, everyone gets turned off. You know what I mean?
I think Kevin Lee was surprised at how good Leo Santos was because it wasn't that he just caught him. Leo Santos was dominating him up until that point, and I'm a guy that thought Kevin Lee was going to win tonight. And Leo Santos, he was out-striking Kevin Lee. He was out-grappling him too, and then he knocked him out. So it was a very good performance. Obviously, some people think it was an early stoppage. Listen, I bet on Kevin Lee, and I don't think that was an early stoppage. So
I don't think that there was any early stoppages today. I've heard a bunch of people complain about early stoppages. People complained about last night's stoppage in the Frankie Edgar fight from being an early stoppage, and that's appalling to me as well. God damn it, people! If you get dropped and you stop for a second, if at any moment you just stop fighting, or it looks as if you stop fighting, to me that's an okay stop. That needs to be stopped. Sure, you can wake up because you got punched in the face again, but the initial reaction to the earlier hit was your brain being like, "Oh, it's time for us to sleep." Then yes, that is a good time to stop fighting. You know, we want fighters to have very long, successful careers. And just the nature of the beast is very brutal, and the people in the sport are fast, and you see a lot of shots on undefended, unconscious people, a lot of follow-up hammer fists. So anytime we have the chance to minimize, kind of the massive head trauma to a person who's already unconscious, let's take that chance. So stop fucking complaining, MMA, fans, about early stoppages. Let's protect these fighters a little bit more.
It's definitely, and also the refs got to take into account the stakes of the fight. Now I know that comment might cause a stir because all fights should be treated equally, but let me tell you where I'm going with this.
Yeah.
Chris Weidman versus Luke Rockhold. One can make an argument that Herb Dean, it was Herb Dean, right? And let's just say it was Herb Dean.
Sure.
One could make the argument that Herb Dean could have stopped that fight at the end of that one round where he was full mounted, and there were 10 seconds left in the round, and it's like, well, you got to give the champ, a chance. And if they would have stopped it there, I wouldn't have been pissed off. But they didn't. They let it continue. And then the next time he got in that position, the ref didn't let him take the same amount of punishment. That's when he came in and stopped the fight because he knew right then and there that it was over.
You made a really good point in that I think it's also the situation of the round. He knew that there was 30 seconds left and that the champ could survive. He was still conscious and trying to defend himself. He was just in a really bad spot. It's really hard in full mount to do anything that's, really gonna change, the whole complexion of where the fighters are and what position they're in. But he's definitely conscious enough to survive the round and should be given that chance to have a next round, in my opinion. But then when you saw him getting mounted and getting beat up again, you saw something like 3 minutes left on the clock. No man should take that beating for 3 minutes. And with the beating he'd already taken in the third round before it, it was the best decision to stop that fight at that point. Let's talk about these Fight Pass prelim cards, but like shum quick, because honestly, they're all right, but they were nothing to write home to mom about. Magomed Mustafa, whatever. Jesus Christ. You know what? Dagestan and Brazil are fucking me, and thank God. And then sometimes once you add Asia in there, I just realize how uncultured I am once I try to pronounce foreign names. I'm just basically a fucking moron. But Magomed beat the shit out of New England's own Joe Proctor. I like Joe Proctor as a fighter a little bit, but just not a high level athlete, and Dagestan was, and he put his lights out real quick.
Yeah, Magomed Mustafayev, he's a very impressive prospect. A lot of people criticize his UFC debut against Piotr Hallman, but what you got to understand is that Piotr Hallman is tough as hell. Yeah. And if you go back and rewatch that fight, some people are saying, oh, it was only stopped because of the cut. Nah. He went out there and beat his ass, okay?
Yeah.
In this fight, he got the UFC jitters behind him. He goes in there against Joe Proctor, who's known for being a very durable guy, and he just ran through him, man. And what I want to see next is I want to see Magomed Mustafayev take on Adriano Martinez. I know Adriano Martinez is a vet. He's been around the game a long time, but, he's known now as the Russian killer. He beat Rustam Khabilov and Islam Makhachev back-to-back. I want to see him take on
Muay Thai, too. That's a good stylistic matchup.
And the thing, Andrew, is that I do want to see Adriano Martinez versus Rashid Magomedov, but that's probably not going to happen because they're both at ATT. So let's get the other Russian that's at Greg Jackson's, who's 5, and let's put him up against Adriano Martinez. You like it?
Yeah, all Russians are interchangeable, and that's the most important part. That you can just, like the good Soviets they are, any good commies are as good as the other. John McDessie against Yancy Medeiros. Yancy Medeiros pulls out a split decision victory in a tight, somewhat controversial one. I kind of gave the nod to McDessie, but that goddamn hook that dropped him clean at the end, that was the move of the fight. So, a tip of the cap to Hawaii's Yancy Medeiros. Hawaii had a killer night tonight.
Hell yeah, man. I put 2 units on Yancy Medeiros at plus 155. We cashed that one. Obviously, it was scary. I thought it could have gone to McDessie, but it is what it is, man. You can make an argument for Yancy winning the first round and the third round. Third round, for sure, he dropped him at the end, and, he fucking, if he had 10 more seconds, he would have put him out cold, but it is what it is, and we got the victory, so props to Yancy. But I would have expected him to look a little better, but at the same time, John McDessie is a very dangerous striker, and if you don't feel like you're on his level, play it safe. And he played it safe, and he won tonight. So I think depending on the matchup, we might see him go back to his his more reckless style, but it just didn't work out tonight.
Yeah, I think that there was, there's a lot of negative attitude towards Yancey. He dropped a couple fights and, in some lackluster performances, some question marks around him. So just like a really opportune time for a guy like him to land that hook in the third round. And, I like him. I think he has an exciting style that he's really yet to showcase as much as he could. So, happy for him. A little disappointed in McDessie because that's another, really great kickboxer. And I'd like to see both of these guys, move on in their career and be in some exciting action fights. And then we have the curtain jerker. Court McGee returns after an extended layoff and, kind of puts the beating on this Marcio Andre Jr. Court McGee kind of had a thing going on back in the day and then got derailed by injury. What kind of a ceiling do you see for good old Court at 170 pounds now instead of the old 185?
Well, first of all, I thought that Marcio Lioto, I thought he was going to put on a better fight than that, but it is what it is. Props to Court McGee, and give him a fringe, top 25 guy. I mean, who's in that division that he should fight? I mean, obviously you could do, if they're doing
Nelson.
What about Kyle Noak after Kelvin Gastelum takes care of him?
Kyle Noak got put into a fight against. Oh, you're saying after that Kevin Gastelum fight, after Kevin Gastelum dismisses him?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. That sounds like a fight, but you probably want to give Court someone who's I don't know. I like him against a fringe top 15 guy. It's a 185 pounder coming down, so you kind of want to test the waters and see if you can get something going there. He's a tough winner, so the UFC is always kind of giving that a little bit more credence than it really deserves as far as pushing a guy. So,
what about Brandon Thatch versus Court McGee?
Hey, there's a matchup. Kind of two lengthy guys, two guys who train at altitude. Put it on a Denver card or something so that we don't have to watch people sucking wind.
Yep, there you go.
There it is. All right, we've broken down every card. I want to pick out some performance of the nights. Get our promoter hat on. If we're handing out the big bills, who are we handing out our fight of the night money to?
All right. Well, I'm pulling up the card as we speak. So let me do performance of the night first. Is that cool?
Okay? You got those? Yeah, we can do those first. That's fine.
Okay. So obviously you got to give Conor McGregor a performance of the night. I mean, he knocked out the Jose Aldo in 13 seconds, and then you could also give a performance of the night to Leo Santos. I mean, he went out there and he knocked out Kevin Lee. No one expected that to happen, and it's funny because Leo Santos, he only had one career win via knockout up until this point. So, that to me is a performance of the night. And when you want to talk about fight of the night, you could either do, how about this? Uriah Faber versus Frankie Saenz. If that by some stretch of the imagination doesn't win it, then maybe Weidman versus Rockhold, but I'm going Saenz versus Faber.
Yeah, you made some good points there. Obviously, Conor McGregor fight of the night. KO of the night. My bad. Just a seriously brilliant performance. Luke Rockhold, I think, probably deserves the second one. Tip of the cap mentions to Leonardo Santos and his, incredible KO there. I think Wally Alves also had a, fantastic sub. But ultimately, I'm gonna say that the Stars win this one. I usually like seeing the guys at the lower end of the card getting those 50 Gs, to kind of change their life. But really, if we're talking about what were the finishes that defined this night, Conor McGregor, Luke Rockhold. My fight of the night, tip of the cap. It's tough not to say Faber size. Let me look over my grades here and see who I really liked in a hard-fought battle. Oh, that is my best ranked decision. Is Uriah Faber against Frankie Saenz? Guess you could say, Souza, Romero, but it kind of dulled out and stalled out in the last round. So I'll give my fight of the night to Frankie Saenz and Uriah Faber. I guess both those guys could use 50 Gs except for Faber. Faber's rolling in dough. He's all right. But let's get Frankie Saenz paid in a losing victory or in a losing battle. All right, overall, the whole card. You got to give it a letter grade, A to F. What are you going to give, UFC 193, the experience?
Well, I gave UFC 189 an A plus because it was an A plus.
Yeah.
I'm gonna give tonight. Listen, I'll give it an A minus. I know that some of the fights might have been hit or miss, but the magnitude of what went down in that main event, I mean, dude, everyone here at my crib was jumping out of their seats, and it's just a historic moment. I mean, the first time in 10 years, the only featherweight champion in UFC history, not only was he dethroned, he was knocked out in the first exchange of the fight in 13 seconds. And Conor McGregor is a guy, he called his shot. He said, and he was a little modest. He said it's going to be over within 4 minutes of the first round. It was over in the first exchange, man.
In 20 seconds.
13 seconds.
Yeah. My letter grade for the fight's an A. Like I said last night, just like when you take those courses in college, you can fuck up a semester early, but you come strong in that final. You deliver that nice end of term paper, and God damn it, did Conor McGregor deliver? A fantastic fight in a big spot, a fantastic fight in the co-main. Good fights in the pay-per-view portion of this, high-level talent, sport-changing shit. Stuff that got me really, really excited after 3 nights of watching a lot of fights. Couldn't be a better weekend for the UFC. Couldn't be a better card for the UFC. Missed that elusive A plus because it was missing that spirit of 189, that kind of like this snowball effect of insane shit happening. But overall, fantastic card. A great night to be a fan of MMA. A great night for the sport all around. All right, so that's going to do it for this episode of Before the Bald Man Speaks. Check us out next week. Shit, I'll be broadcasting live from Bedford, New York. Before the Bald Man Speaks, Gel's on the road again. My guest that week will be, I think, Nick Baldwin's coming on to help me break down UFC on Fox to talk about RDA against Cowboy Cerrone, and we'll close out the year with a big episode 25. I will also be earlier that week on this man's show, on Dan LEvi's show, Half the Battle, and we'll be breaking down that whole card, and you can get our bets and predictions and everything. Dan, my man, thank you so much for coming on the show. You were fantastic as always. We always seem to get you on really big nights for the sport and really big action cards, and we always seem to put some money in your pocket too. Why don't you tell these people how they can put some goddamn money in their pockets and how they can connect you on social media?
Well, first of all, Andrew, I want to thank you so much for not only having me back on Before the Bald Man Speaks, but for being my good luck charm, because every single time I come on this show, I win big. Obviously 9.9 units on the weekend, and if you want to tail me, obviously go to bestfightpicks.com, follow me on Twitter at bestfightpicks, and the thing I really want to plug is my show Half the Battle. I'm talking to not just your favorite UFC fighters, but the most exciting fighters in the game. One of the rules I have is that I'm not going to have guys on my show that push people up against the fence and, put you to sleep. I'm having guys that are putting on fight of the years, like Nicholas Dalby. He just had a close to a fight of the year candidate with Darren Till. I have him on next week. Obviously, my boy James Vick. And, another interesting thing is that after I have someone on Half the Battle, you need to bet that the fight does not go the distance prop, because every single time I've had someone on Half the Battle, they go on and fight, and their fight doesn't go the distance. Let me give you a couple examples. Louis Smolka finishes Patrick Houlihan. Anthony Burchak, unfortunately, he got knocked out, but the fight didn't go the distance. Kevin Lee, fight didn't go the distance. So once they come on my show, their next fight will not go the distance. So you heard it here first, folks, on Before the Bald Man Speaks, and subscribe to Half the Battle on iTunes.
Yeah, thank you very much once again for doing the show. Definitely go go to his website too, Best Fight Picks. You can toss your email in there and get picks, and they've been paying dividends. So definitely get some tools with yourself, get some information for yourself for some people who are making money in this game. God damn it, people! Thanks once again, Dan, for doing the show. Fantastic of you to do it. Thank you to everyone who stuck around and watched the show, especially the people who watch it live. But even if you catch it on the replay, we love having you, and we love people who support the show. Please, if you did enjoy the show, take a second, give us the thumbs up down there, subscribe, share this on Twitter, share this on your social medias, talk about how this is the greatest show in the world with all your friends. But mostly we just, love having you listen, and I love anyone out there who, reaches out to me and talks fights. This is just a fantastic night for the sport, and I consider myself lucky to have people who are interested in my opinion about this fantastic sport. So thank you very much. Thank you to my guest Dan. Thanks everybody. Fantastic night for UFC. Fantastic night for the show. Peace out. Love y'all. Take it easy. Good night.